Hi, friends, and welcome. I am your hot mess of a host, Mary Hendricks from The Very Merry Life, your new mom friend that soon will feel like an old friend. Twice a week, every week, I want you to come and join me as we cover moments in motherhood, marriage, sex, and more. Some moments worth savoring, others worth surviving, all with a laugh, pep talk, or F-bomb every now and again. I want you to come as you are, but leave the sugarcoating behind because, guys, we know how sweet it already is. So what do you say? Up for picking some daisies? All right. Hello, everyone. Happy whatever day it is. I don't know what day I'm posting this yet, but I'm going to guess on Tuesday because Tuesdays are usually when I post a lot of these. But hello, welcome back to another episode. Hi, Kendall. Welcome.
Hey, Mary. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited. So obviously, if you guys can't tell by Kendall's voice, he is a man. He is a dad. And I am so excited because I was actually just telling Kendall offline that I've been trying to get more men to come on as guests, get more dads, get more father figures on this podcast, because I know a lot of you guys listen with your spouses nearby. I know a lot of you want your spouses to listen. And honestly, at the end of the day, while, majority of you guys listening are moms, this is a big conversation that moms and dads need to be involved in. And I'm really excited to hear more. So, Kendall, with that being said, I want you to introduce yourself and then we're just going to get on into it.
Fantastic. Well, it's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to talking today. I'm the author of Rookie Father, came out last year, and it's the first book for men that is written almost not exclusively, but for men who are brand new to fatherhood. And that's essentially code for saying men that were raised in the absence of a father.
Yeah.
And one thing I found when I was researching details for the book is that when you look at parents today that are entering their parenting years who were raised in the 90s, there are 19 million men in this country that were raised without a father.
Wow.
And when you think about going to that stage of your life, I wanted to create something for them specifically, advice that addresses the demons in your closet, the enthusiasm and excitement about being a parent, being a dad, and being able to embrace it without any restrictions. And that's kind of the aim of the book, is to give you quick tidbits of facts to kind of get you involved and engaged as a new parent.
Yeah. And I absolutely love it. I went through it briefly, and I absolutely adore it just because I love the idea, and I love that it was inspired obviously from your background and growing up. What you said your mom was a single mom and going through everything. And the part that I absolutely loved is that you said, FYI, spoiler alert, it's not the 1950s anymore.
God, no.
But I think in general, like, this is a great, and again, you're speaking more to men that didn't grow up with a father figure. And I think in general, it's a great book for anyone to read, especially men who did grow up with a father too, because I think the father figure has also shifted tremendously. If you think about I can think about my grandfather. My mom always talks about it, how my grandfather never changed a diaper once, like things like that, where it was just, it's a different dynamic, and the dynamic keeps changing as we keep going further and further along. And that's something that I talk about often is, we're trying to get dads more involved and trying to get them to feel empowered and talk about those things. Cause I think that's the big thing with, women and mom accounts like mine, as we talk about the mental load and we talk about the distribution of labor in the household and stuff like that, where we don't say it to be a nag, and we don't say those things for a problem. We say it because we want to empower dads. We want them to feel like they are an equal part of the relationship and equal part of the family, because they're extremely important. So I love this.
Yeah. No, thanks. It's definitely not. The 1950s dad is dead. He no longer exists. And in that era is, when you think about that era, it was the man was the breadwinner and the woman raised the kids.
Yeah.
And that was essentially the model, and that model's gone for better and worse. I think for better, because there's more quality in the home, obviously, now. And the one thing I encourage dads to do is, if you come home and everything's squared away with the child, if he's sleeping, if your wife was on the couch and there's apparently nothing to do, you don't go into the garage and do your own hobbies. Like, just take care of some things around the house. Like spend that first 45 minutes when you get home doing what you can to support your wife. Yeah. And what I found is that if you do it without even being asked to, one, it removes the nagging and the friction. Two, all of a sudden, if let's say your wife wakes up from she's on the couch, passed out from a day of taking care of the kids, and all of a sudden all the dishes are done, or the bill's been paid or whatever, and then you get that information, it's so rewarding just to see the expression on your wife's face from the appreciation she gives to you, which appreciation is very lacking in those first couple of years of parenting. There's always friction. And that's why I'm a big proponent of equality.
Yeah. Yeah, it's huge. I mean, how old are your kids? Obviously, you're a dad, so how old are your kids?
My son just turned 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a big birthday.
Just one child. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's a big birthday. That's exciting. Yeah. My son just turned 4 yesterday, so we had an emotional day yesterday. I was like, oh my God. It's just like, and I have a 5.5-year-old, she's almost 6, and then 4, and then an 18-month-old, but I like it's wild all of a sudden. But yeah, it is. There is a lot of friction with like the early years and just all of it. And it's big. I know for my husband and I, we've been married and we've gone through those bouts like everyone does, but parenthood really rocks the boat. And I think it really rocked the boat surprisingly during after our third postpartum period, because we no longer were equal anymore. We didn't have 2 kids. We had the third to like, someone was going to be unbalanced no matter what. If either someone's taking 2 kids and someone else is taking 1, it was just a lot. But also for him, like my husband grew up kind of in a tumultuous type of childhood, and he didn't really have that modeling for stuff. And I think sometimes I get frustrated at it where I'm like, you didn't have this, and now we need to kind of walk you through it. But I don't want to do it in a way where I think that's why your book is so nice, where I'm going to like kind of just safely tuck this by his bedside, because I like that you are talking to him, because I think sometimes there is this connotation with women talking to men, and I know I do it. I get annoyed. So it doesn't always come out so nice. So I think to have another man being like, hey dude, like this is just kind of how it should go. I think that's great.
Thank you. Yeah.
For you, with like learning father figures, since you didn't grow up with one in your home, where did you learn? Like, what was your father figures as you were growing up?
I was really a sponge from the age of 7 on.
Okay.
And my parents separated at 6. Dad moved down to Florida. And probably I was 7, maybe 8 years old, and I actually write about this in the book. You know, certain conduct that fathers did in my neighborhood, I started to look at as like, that's how a dad should behave. Or like, I get that. I remember this one article. It's actually the first chapter talks about how I was with my best friend and the father comes into the room and it's a beautiful sunny day. Yeah. He looks outside, looks at us watching the TV, and now it's like 10:30 and we've been there for hours. And he's just like, kicks us outside. Like, get the hell out of my house. Go play. And, you know, at the time it was like, okay, a little shocking, like whatever, getting yelled at from a father, which I was not used to. Yeah. And then we had a great day. And at the end of it, I'm walking home, I'm like, okay, that wasn't a bad thing. Like, maybe that's a good dad move. Yeah. But what I also started to do is I looked at the women in my life. And I looked at certain qualities they had that I could make my own. There's no reason why they can't. And I looked at father figures on TV. Yeah. Like, before he went into a death spiral of tumultuous negativity, and deserving so, Bill Cosby, The Cosby Show, I gleaned so much stuff off that program about what it meant to be a dad. And it was, when I finally came to fatherhood, I really kind of did not an assessment, but looked at like, how did I want to parent? And the good news from my perspective was my wife and I were on the same page. Like, discipline first, keep things tidy, exceed at school as your number one job. A lot of these things have come into play, that being on the same page as your spouse, for us, was critical. And if I encourage all dads to really work through that and look for ways that you can work together. And if there's a difference of opinion, like, make amends and do the best you can to really come up with a game plan of how you're going to parent.
I always think it's interesting because I feel like that is like, my husband and I have talked about it. My husband and I, we got married in a Catholic church, so we had to do like the whole pre-Cana thing. So it's like these classes, I don't know if you're familiar, but you have to take all these classes and whatever. But it was mainly for marriage, like just marriage itself, just him and I. But it was like the fine details of like finances and things like that. And it never really talked about kids other than just have a lot of them, like just keep populating type of thing. Right. And when we got married and like really had kids and things like that, like it was never a conversation about like, what type of parenting styles we want and what type of discipline styles we agree on and don't agree on, because that for my husband and I is a difference of opinions, because
Right.
I think he grew up his parents were a little bit older than mine. So he grew up a little bit even more old school than myself.
Right.
And so when you see that, and my husband doesn't really see that side. And so when I do things, sometimes he thinks I'm a little too soft. And then I think he's way too hard.
Right.
And I think that those are conversations that you have to have beforehand. Like, I think those are such a huge conversation that you have to have before you have kids, because it's like, no one preps you for this stuff. I think that's why you hit so many like fine points where you're like, oh, okay, we should have talked about this.
Yeah.
Instead of freaking out once the baby is actually here.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of it you have to, it's trial and error, because every child's different. It's not going to be the playbook you start with is not going to be the one you end up with.
Yeah.
But having that flexibility is important. And in most cases, I found like there's always like some truth in what might be a false reality and vice versa. And you have to basically adapt accordingly. And it's just about communication with your spouse and how important that is.
Yeah. It's big. I feel like it's, and like I said, I've found that there's always been a little bit of pushback, and I've had guests come on before and we've talked about that, and most of them are women. I actually had a woman on, and she's wonderful. She's articulate, very much so, in terms of, the equal divide and the representation in the household. And she talks a lot about like the mental load and things like that. But she said, especially now, because she's a working mom, her spouse is a working mom. And I feel like that just throws a dynamic, but it's almost just that conversation that you're having, and that the encouragement that you have in your book is just not the norm. I feel like kind of dads, like even just from the get-go of like pregnancy, the moment you have a pregnancy, it's like the woman's kind of responsibility to figure out like the birthing and having a say in the labor. And I feel like I know that was definitely something that my husband didn't do our first birth. And then I think our second and our third, he definitely had like more of an input as to like how he needed this to go. And I realized like how heavy that was for him, because you almost, as a woman, like you don't even think about it. You're like, oh, this isn't like a big deal for him. Like, why does he need to be involved? And you realize like, this is his introduction to fatherhood too. Like, this is a big thing for dads. And we kind of like, I think the societal norm has just been like, dads really aren't like they're second fiddle almost. And we realize like that is definitely not the case. And I think that's why, dads also they've been made second fiddle, where like small achievements have kind of been applauded in big ways, where you realize like, no, we like, I want this big for you. Like, and that's what I've always said to my husband. I'm like, I really want this for you. And it's terrible. But sometimes I tell him, I'm like, if something happened to me, you wouldn't want to be scared. Like, that's not something you want to be scared and nervous about, is like, you would want to know that you have a plan, because I have a plan if something were to happen. But you need to know that if, I'm going away in November, or do you know how to pack their lunches? Do you know how to do things like that? Because that's a really good thing for you to be involved in, and your kids want to see it. It's a big thing too.
Yeah. It's important that the kids see and experience that equality.
Yeah.
On some level, like in our house, like I love to cook.
Yeah.
So I don't cook every single night. Like if I have a crazy night, or I have a rehearsal to go to, or whatever it may be, we adjust accordingly. But like, if I could cook a nice family meal every night, I would do it. Yeah. And I try to as much as I can. But that's my jam.
Yeah.
Like putting food on the table, like food shopping, the whole thing.
Love it.
I can't do the laundry. I can do it. But I can't do it all. So like divide and conquer.
Yeah. See, that's what my spouse and I do. My husband used to work at Hollister in his college years. So like with laundry, he's like my go-to man for that, especially because he folds things so nicely. And I'm just like, you can take over. But I absolutely love that. So with fatherhood, and you obviously becoming a dad 10 years ago and things like that, because women talk about frequently about becoming a mom, and it's a huge shift. Like it's called matrescence. Like it's a huge thing, a shift in everything, spiritual, hormonal, physical. Yeah. Dads also totally experienced something. Did you feel a huge shift when you became a dad? And what was that like?
I did to some extent, but I also was so looking forward to it for so many years.
Yeah.
And when we finally brought home our child, it was like my sleeves were rolled up. I was ready to go. Yeah. And what I do is I also the origins of the book, I'm actually an author of fiction as well.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And about a little after a year after my child was born, I was literally up. I write in the mornings at like 6 a.m. I'm up in the morning and I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to write next? And I had some ideas for books. I want to get back into it.
Yeah.
And all I could think about was like this journey as a father without a core role model in my back pocket. Like, how did I get here? And then when you look at fatherhood books that are on the market, there's not my book is the only one that speaks to dads that were raised in absence of one or in absence of two parents.
Yeah.
And it's not exclusively for that, but with nothing on the market, I'm like, all right, let me just do a brainstorm. And I did a brainstorm and came up with about 60 ideas, tips that I thought could be applicable and useful. And through that process, I ended up getting to 135 of them. And I wrote each chapter 1 to 2 pages long, and that was it. Just quick, get in, get what you want, get out. And one of those chapters talks about that first year after your child's born, just take a sabbatical from your personal hobbies.
Yeah.
If you're an avid runner, or you're a workaholic, or you're a musician, just take a big time out for 12 months and just focus on being a dad.
Yeah.
And at that 12-month mark, you've got to get back into it. You will lose your mind. You've got to get your hobbies back, your passions back. You need an escape from your marriage, from your kids, from your job. You've got to do it. So mine's music. I'm a drummer in a band, and I love it. And so one night a week on average, I'm out jamming with some buddies of mine, and like that's it. And things come and go, but you need that sabbatical to really focus on being a great partner, a great dad, and to really promote equality even for your own self, so you have a voice that's equal to your wife and the family, which is important. Yeah.
Well, and we say equality and stuff like that. Sometimes I feel like it can't be. I feel like sometimes no matter what, it will just never be 50-50. I think depends on the phase of life. But I think it can't be, but I also think that there are other ways that you can pick up and do that. Like for the newborn years, did you find that was a little bit harder to be as involved? Like I know for us, my husband tried so hard, but like I was breastfeeding and things like that. So I took the brunt of things and that was okay by me. But I think it was actually after a second where I was like, you need to kind of like, you can't do this, but maybe take care. That's where the laundry came in. I was like, can you handle laundry and things like that? And
exactly.
Yeah, that was like a big turning point where I don't think it can be always 100, like 50-50, but I think it could be like 100 effort per se.
Yeah, women do. I mean, I'll tell you, it's like you hear these stories and we didn't breastfeed, but like women do take it on the chin those first 6 months until you get to the solid foods and they're off the breast milk. Yeah. They take it on the chin, but you can clean, you can cook, you can vacuum, you can take care of things, you can pay the bills. There's things you can do on the ancillary or on the periphery that's going to help make your wife's life easier.
Yeah.
And that's what it should be.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you basically need to focus on if you're not sitting there nursing the baby at 1 a.m., 3 a.m., 5 a.m., et cetera. There's other things you have to do in the background.
Yeah. Yeah. Now with, obviously, because you don't have that role model per se, do you ever get stuck in, do dads get stuck in comparison? Do you guys I'm always curious on a dad's perspective. Do men get stuck in comparison? Like women and moms get very stuck in comparison. Am I doing this right? Am I failing? Do men stay up and worry about this stuff? Are you worrying about this stuff? Was that something that was ever part of your journey? Because I feel like I always wonder that stuff. Like I always ask my husband, I'm like, do you sit and think about this stuff, or are women just extra awful to ourselves?
My answer is no.
Okay.
I don't think guys do it. I think some guys are either stubborn and either lean too much on their wives.
Okay.
The alternative is, and what I encourage, and there's a whole section on this as well in the book, is going out and actively seeking advice.
Yeah.
And then once you hear an opinion, if you disagree with it, if it doesn't sound right, it's an opinion. And you can take it, discard it, make it your own, whatever. But I think the first really 5 years especially, like you should be observing. You should be, asking questions. If you see something going on a playground, like one thing I saw that I always loved is when we were teaching our son to climb the ladders at the playground. Like I'd say, hey, look, we point out purposely. My wife and I did this. Like when he's going up higher on the rung of ladder, I'm like, look, it's three, 2 arms, 1 leg at a time, 3 limbs at all time. If you don't, you're going to fall and you're going to break your neck.
Yeah.
Or it's like if you're sprinting with a stick, I'm like, you can't spin around with a short stick because if you fall, that could go and pierce your skin.
Yeah.
And just gave reality. And his common sense, I think, was helped by that. I think he gave some thought before his actions. And you see parents sometimes run around for the kids. They're terrified they're going to fall. I'm like, just teach them.
Yeah.
Like try, you have to give these lessons. I got that from my mother-in-law.
Yeah. Where
her lesson we had on our child was able to lift the baby gate and walk around aimlessly in our living room. We have a fireplace and a mantle, and kid would go over, or someone would go over and bang on the glass. And we were talking about what to do with my mother-in-law and my wife on the phone. She's like, just teach them.
Yeah.
Just yell at them. Tell them to get away from there.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
So my wife and I are like, oh, duh, okay, let's try that. Oh. So we walk over, bang, get away from there. And we just barking at him once or twice a day.
Yeah.
2 months later, when I'm cooking, he's not walking in the kitchen. He's not banging on the mantle. He's not pulling out cords from the wall. And by the time he's 2.5, he could freely walk around the first floor. I think that was, for us, we haven't always won. That was a win for us. And we'll take it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why, and every time I'm online and things like that, and you see the representation of dads, and I always curious because I saw one recently and it was like a mom saying, me going through the day of like what I did wrong and listed off everything. And then she just did a video of her husband, like dancing around or something. And he was just like in La La Land, like not worrying about it. And I was like, that must be so nice. But I think that's the attitude that sometimes us moms need to adopt to. And I think women, maybe we should read this book. Like maybe this is something we should adopt for ourselves, because I think we overthink it. I don't know what it is, but I think we've overthought it because there's been a lot of modeling for moms and there's been a lot of standards. And I think the standards with dads has just been, I don't know. I don't know what the difference is, but it's definitely been a little harder hitting for the mom portion, which is always interesting.
Yeah. And I think also the media and like that video, it's patronizing to men. Yeah. I really believe that. Yeah. And it's funny, whatever, part of me is like, enough. Part of me is like, if you want an engaged, involved husband, dad, if you want someone that is worthy of respect, treat him with it. Yeah. And maybe that guy is in La La Land. I don't know. But someone has to have a come to Jesus talk with him. Yeah. And
there's a lot of that stuff. I see it so much on social media. And sometimes there's the ones that really drive me bonkers are the ones where the wives say that we do it to ourselves on both ends. I think moms do it to ourselves, or women and men do it to ourselves, but it's one where the wives have to hide their purchases from their spouse, saying I'm hiding my Amazon purchases. Ooh. And I'm like, that's not even a funny thing, because I'm like, that's actually really not good if you ever run into stuff like that. So I'm like, that's not cool and things like that. But it's just on both ends of it where I'm like, we are kind of digging ourselves further and further into a hole where it's just no, why don't we just own that we're adults and we do our own things and that's really it. But yeah, no, it's especially with stuff like that. I think the whole it is patronizing to dads. And I think that's why the whole big conversation when I talk about stuff like this is I want them to be on our level. Because dads, I value dads and I value my husband and I value the love and the effort that he puts in. And I think we've always also equated the effort that they put in to work. And I think even for men, they kind of only look at work as being their main value in a household. And I know for my husband last year, he kind of went through a work shift, and he had a moment where he just looked at me and he said, if I don't have my work, I have nothing. And he didn't mean to say it. And he didn't mean it in the way it came out. But I looked at him, I was like, you are obviously that's not true, but you saw that come out where I was like, we need to sit and you need to re-see that this is that is just a small chunk. But I think that's what society has put such an emphasis on with dads and with men, where it's that's his only he thinks that that's the only thing being brought to the table by him. And I'm like, you are so much more. Dads are such a pivotal part of all of this. And I think that's why I think, I mean, no one can see this right now, but I'll put this on Instagram. But this book is so incredible. It's an incredible resource. Men need it. Dads need it.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think it's, I would love to see, when wives are, either bantering amongst yourselves or on social media, when there's a goof, like, the idiot father. And I talk about this in one of the chapters. It's like, we as consumers, if you're a dad, like, actually there was one insurance company I won't name, that during the Olympics a couple years ago, they had the dad trying to pole vault during the Olympics season. And they're trying to pole vault using a pool pole over the pool, and they crashed and they landed. And the wife's just sitting there going, wow, that's not very bright. And I'm like, really? Well, maybe every dad should cancel that insurance to that company.
Yeah.
And maybe we should, stick it to them. And when I look at commercials, I mean, commercials are one thing because it's obviously is low-hanging fruit, but like even in like movies, and it's like men deserve more respect. And to your point about, work life being the only thing, I credit the millennials almost exclusively with shifting that perception about the work-life balance, paternity rights, not just maternity rights. A lot of that has happened because of the generation after me, millennials. I'm a Gen Xer. Yeah. So
it really is. It's a huge thing because my husband's a police officer. So even for him, like so when I had my second, he went back, I had C-sections for my second, my third, and we had my first during Christmas. So he thankfully at the time was able to like take off a little bit longer, but I don't think he took off very long. And I know with my second, he didn't. And my third, he only was home with me. I sent my husband back with my second. I think he was able to he balanced his vacation time or whatever, but he doesn't get paternity leave. And he does, there's family leave, but obviously I forget what it's like. I don't think you get really a paycheck or you get a portion of it. But when I had asked him, I was like, cause I was hurting with a C-section, 3 children that I have to manage now. He had to go back. And a big portion of it is that it's old school thinking where it was like, if I don't go back, it's going to look bad on me. And I'm like, this is such shit. This is such shit. It is shifting. It definitely is, but it's definitely you're seeing a generational difference where even like my brother, he's in California. California does a fantastic job with like paternity leave and things like that. And my brother got 8 weeks. I want to say 8 weeks of paternity leave, and he could take it at any point, which was so great.
It's
but
awesome.
my dad with him, I remember my dad's a boomer, and he was kind of like, I wouldn't do that if I were you. He was like, because if they see that you are replaceable, they could easily just go on in. And that's the mentality kind of where we're like, no, we need to switch that a little bit, where it's like, no, he's needed at home. That's number one. Everything else is secondary. But yeah, it's definitely I'll be curious to see how future generations do. I'm kind of excited for it, like for your son and for my son and my daughters more particularly. That's why I love this podcast and I love sharing resources like this because I think I create all of this in the hopes that I won't be needed. Like my content won't be needed one day. And that by the time my daughters become parents and moms and my son, hopefully, God willing, if they want to do that, then hopefully they don't need any of this, that it will just be the norm.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think it's that paternity, it's going to take root. As long as the economy keeps going. And it stays positive. I mean, it's easy to say, easier said than done, but like a lot of industries have to offer that to be competitive. That's because, demand for labor is through the roof. That may change, but that's why a federal law would be a very nice thing.
So nice. And I don't think and I think it's like you were saying, that's why with like commercials, like you mentioned, and even like Instagram posts and stuff like that, we have to like take into account that this is a seriously needed thing. Like dads are not, like I said, they're not just like a accessory to have at home. They're part of it. They're in it. They're just as much needed as, moms need more maternity leave in this country, but dads need it just as much. And, we need to fight for both ends, but we need to fight for like that representation of how dads are perceived in the household, because I think that's where it's very rocky at this point.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, sure.
Awesome. So is anything on the horizon in terms of books with all this, or how's the feedback been on it so far?
It's been awesome.
Good.
This was, my first nationally released book. Friend Milius is the publisher, and it's been an awesome experience to really go into a new genre.
Yeah.
But my next writing project is a work of fiction. And it's a post-apocalyptic. It's a mystery set 40 years in the future. And it is so much fun. Like that's my morning routine is get up, coffee, and I'm editing now. But when I'm in writing mode, like it's just a joy. I am completely disconnected. And I do it before my son wakes up most days.
Yeah.
And it's just my escape from my day job and from everything else. It's just a great little escape for me. And it's a passion of mine.
I love that. I've thankfully have had a lot of authors come on here. I have an author who was a college friend of mine, but she actually she wrote a book similar, kind of like what you're sounding like, but she's just getting released and just hearing about it. And she said it's like you get absorbed into it. You just kind of fall into the world, and I feel that way when I read. So I love hearing that because I would love to write. I need to start writing again, but that's what I went to school for.
Oh, okay, awesome.
But I didn't do anything with it. So one day I'll push myself for that. But awesome. So with that being said, everyone listening, I'm going to link all of the information about Kendall and the book in the show notes. I think that this is great. And for dads, if you are listening, if you were so great to sit for 30 minutes with your wife and hear this, please go read it. Again, even if you didn't grow up in a scenario like this, I think just in general, all dads are, the way society has kind of treated us or treated you, dads, not us, is kind of, they're all rookies at this point. Like they're all rookies. And, I think it depends on the father figure that you had, but I think it's good to start off on a note and just hear from another man that's in your shoes and has walked it and that can kind of, walk you through and lead you through. So thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
Another episode down. Thank you all so much for listening. If you loved today's episode, I would be so appreciative if you would leave a rating and review. I cannot begin to tell you how much those mean to me, but also how much they help me get in front of more eyes and more ears. As always, be sure to check back every Tuesday and Friday for a new episode, whether it's an episode with me and my husband, me and Katie, or just another incredible, amazing guest. Stay tuned for more honest, real, raw chit-chat. And hey, do me a favor before you go. Remind yourself how amazing you are, how enough you are, how special you are. And boy, oh boy, I sure am glad to have you here. Thanks, friend.